21 minutes past 9 Central African time. Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views of myself, Salai Lomakudere. And we're going to be switching gears now to an important conversation, an interesting development coming out of the White House. The Trump administration is turning up the pressure on Iran, it looks, not simply by sanctioning Iranian individuals and companies and Iran as a state, but they're warning other countries and businesses that continue trading with Tehran that they could face American penalties. These are called secondary sanctions, from what I've gathered. And the U.S. has already targeted around 60 individuals, entities, and vessels that are linked to Iran, while warning countries to sever financial and commercial ties with Iran. Also, China, one of Iran's biggest trading partners, is now particularly important to watch, and we'll see how America, quote unquote, deals with that. But here's a bigger question, and I think it's going to be an interesting one. And I hope that our guest will be able to answer it for us. Can the USA actually isolate Iran without disruptions far beyond Iran's borders? And could this mean another, I don't know, disruption to global trade, to energy markets? And what does it mean for countries like South Africa that enjoy cordial diplomatic ties with Iran? We'll be speaking to political analyst and economist Dr. McKinley, who's joining us via a virtual platform to give us more insight on that and the term secondary sanctions. What does it mean? Dale, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Yes, good morning, Salelo, and to your listeners and viewers. Always a pleasure.
No, pleasure's all ours. I want to kickstart this conversation with the term secondary sanctions. If you can just maybe unpack it for us, for people that aren't quite sure what it means. Are you able to explain it in simple terms and give us a bit more details on what America is actually threatening to do here?
Yeah, so the best way to understand secondary sanctions is to personalize it. So imagine that, for example, you have helped somebody steal something or to commit a crime, let's say. And the police, they'll go after the person who actually did the crime. But if they find out that you have helped or, let's say, harbored somebody or given them money, then you could be prosecuted as well, even though you're not directly responsible for what happened. That would be a secondary responsibility. So if you apply that in terms of sanctions, what this really means is, what the United States is doing is threatening all the countries that essentially help Iran, whether that's through oil imports, exports, through industrial, manufactured goods, whatever, economic activity and trade that would assist the Iranian government. They're going to say, basically, if you continue to do this, we're going to target you with sanctions. And then we can talk about that there's many different kinds of sanctions that the United States uses. But those would be then employed on those people that are helping Iran. So it's not the primary target, it's the secondary target.
All of this, I assume it's to further isolate Iran, but is it needed? Is it a measure that could isolate Iran more than it already is?
Well, isolation in terms of economics, obviously. So look, it's clear that this move is a result of the United States being unable to militarily defeat Iran, essentially. When this war started, when Israel brought the United States in, what did the United States say? What did Trump say? He said, first of all, we're going to overthrow the Iranian regime. That's the whole point, is to get rid of them. That hasn't happened. Then it was stop the nuclear program. Well, we don't know really what that is. And then it's to basically create where they can't support their proxies in the region, their supporters. And that hasn't happened either. So now he's turning to the economic side. So I don't know how much more isolation Iran can experience in this regard, but it's certainly going to put the noose a little bit tighter in terms of the Iranian economy, which is already in intensive care. I mean, this country has gone through a whole range of things in the last few months. And we don't know the extent of that, but we do know that prices are going through the roof in Tehran, that the Iranian currency has nosedived. So life is not good for the majority of people, and this is going to make it worse for the majority. It's not really, my sense is, it's not really going to affect the elites. It's not going to affect those that are in power. It's going to affect mostly ordinary people.
There's a it's always the case with things like this. I want to look at China because they are one of Iran's major trading partners. What could this mean for them? How significant would it be if the US actually imposed secondary sanctions on major Chinese companies or some of their financial institutions?
Yeah, well, the big one is oil. China is the biggest importer of Iranian oil by far. I think China took almost 70% of Iranian exports of oil for themselves. So that's the big thing with China. It's not so much the other economic trade. And if the United States targets China and says, okay, well, if you continue to receive Iranian oil, we're going to now put these sanctions onto you. Well, they're going to risk starting a trade war, another trade war with China. That's a different story, because China has its own weapons. China can hit back to the United States on a whole range of fronts. It's not some small country that doesn't really have much economic power. So yes, it could impact the Chinese, but it could also very seriously impact the United States as well. So this is a dangerous game when the United States threatens these things, and then with countries like China, who can basically play the same game with the United States, as opposed to other countries where the United States can act more as a bully.
And could this be one of those measures compounded into everything else that the United States of America and this administration have introduced or spoken about in the last couple of years, ultimately accelerate the creation of alternative financial and trading systems that could potentially operate outside the US dollar and the control of America?
Yeah, that's a long-term prospect. I don't think we're going to see that in the short term, because that requires cooperation amongst those countries. And so let's take BRICS, for example. Now, BRICS has been talking about this alternative currency denomination and other currencies other than the US dollar to set up its own financial institutions and everything else. It hasn't happened. And that's been going on for 10 years. And the reason why is because BRICS countries themselves aren't able to come to the table. So India has different, it has its own tensions with China and Brazil and the rest of it. So while I think there's a good talk on that front, the reality is that, yes, it could push things further in that direction, but the probabilities of creating this alternative architecture really are not about the United States per se. It's about whether the countries in BRICS and the countries in the global south can overcome their own differences and their own national sort of perspectives and interests and push this kind of agenda. I doubt that's going to be happening anytime soon.
Speaking of BRICS, maybe we can bring it a bit closer to home for South Africa. What does it mean for us? Are they, companies, businesses doing business with Iran, and could these secondary sanctions affect them? And then just how much of a trading partner is Iran to South Africa? Are we ultimately also going to be at the barrel of this gun?
Well, Iran's not a huge economic partner of South Africa. I think we have closer diplomatic and political relations with the present government than we do in economic trade. There are some. We do rely somewhat on some of the oil products, not as large as many other countries in our continent or in the global south. But I think our importation, particularly refined petroleum and diesel, is a little bit more exposed on that front. But if you remember, that one of the biggest investments in Iran was MTN. Over the last 10 or 15, and they've just basically pulled out. So our exposure directly to Iran is not great, but I think what the more as we've seen with Donald Trump and his approach to South Africa, if they feel South Africa is helping Iran in any way, whether or not that's economically or politically or protecting, then they could target us again. You saw what he just did with Canada and slapping 50% tariffs again on Canadian, and that's their northern neighbor. So that's the problem with Trump. He's totally unpredictable. You don't know what is going to really happen. But the bottom line is that South Africa is going to have to tread a little bit of a middle road here because it's in our context, we don't have a very strong economy. We don't have a lot of tools to fight back. Yeah.
Very interesting. Dr. Dale McKinley, political analyst and economist. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Salelo.
There we go. With that, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.